Picture yourself at a family dinner, the table set with your grandmother's china, the air filled with the warmth of home-cooked food and the laughter of those you love most. Your parents swap stories, your siblings tease, and every moment feels like a thread in the fabric of your life. But what if that fabric was woven with lies? What if the man you called Dad, the one who taught you to throw a football or wiped your tears after a fall, wasn't your father at all? What if the truth about your family wasn't just a secret but a betrayal so profound it could shatter everything you've ever known? This is the story of Desmond Carter, a man whose simple curiosity about his roots unearthed a truth that sparked betrayal, rage, and a tragedy that would echo through his community. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching tale, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Are you chilling in New York, sipping coffee in London, or maybe tuning in late at night from Sydney? Drop your location in the comments below, and let's see how far this true crime story reaches. Buckle up for a 40-minute deep dive into a case that'll make you question family, trust, and the cost of uncovering the past. Hit that like button, grab a drink, and let's unravel this heartbreak together. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more true crime stories that'll keep you up at night. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Desmond Carter was a man who carried the weight of his community's respect like a badge of honor. In his early 40s, this Jacksonville, Florida, police officer was a beacon of integrity in a city that needed heroes. With his warm hazel eyes, close-cropped hair, and a smile that could calm even the most heated situations, Desmond was the kind of cop who knew his neighbors by name. He patrolled the streets of his childhood neighborhood, mentored kids at the local rec center, and earned commendations for his cool-headed leadership during high-stakes cases. To colleagues at the precinct, he was a rock, someone who could defuse a standoff with a steady voice or solve a case with a sharp instinct. To his neighbors, he was the guy who'd stop by to check on elderly Mrs. Jenkins or coach Little League on weekends. Desmond's life seemed anchored in a family that was the envy of Jacksonville. His father, Ray Carter, was a retired mechanic, a man whose calloused hands and quiet wisdom had fixed more than just cars. He'd mended hearts, too, with his unwavering support for his son. His mother, Charlene, was the soul of the family, her gentle laugh and Sunday dinners a cornerstone of their tight-knit bond. Family gatherings at the Carter home were legendary, tables overflowing with fried catfish, collard greens, and peach cobbler, the air filled with stories and laughter. Desmond grew up believing he was the luckiest man alive, raised by parents whose love for each other was a lighthouse in his life. But beneath this perfect facade lay a secret so devastating it would rewrite his entire existence, turning love into betrayal and trust into tragedy. Desmond's childhood was a tapestry of warmth and tradition, woven in the heart of Jacksonville's African-American community. The Carters lived in a modest two-story home on a tree-lined street, its front porch adorned with hanging ferns and a swing that creaked in the evening breeze. Desmond's earliest memories were of Sunday mornings. The house alive with the sizzle of bacon and the rich aroma of Charlene's cornbread baking in a cast-iron skillet. Ray would sit at the head of the table, carving a roast with precision, his deep voice recounting stories of his youth, tales of fishing trips with his own father, or the time he fixed a neighbor's car in a rainstorm. "Family is everything, son," Ray would say, ruffling Desmond's hair with a callous hand. Charlene, a school librarian with a love for stories, filled their home with books and family lore, weaving tales of their ancestors, West African roots from the Ivory Coast, a whisper of Cherokee heritage from her grandmother's side. "We're survivors, Desmond," she'd say, her eyes sparkling as she passed him a plate of her famous sweet potato pie. "Our blood carries stories of strength." Those stories shaped Desmond's identity, giving him a sense of pride in his heritage. As a teenager, he worked summers at Ray's auto shop, learning to change oil and rebuild engines, absorbing his father's lessons about hard work and community. "A man's worth is in what he gives back," Ray told him, words Desmond carried into his dream of becoming a police officer. When he graduated from the police academy at 22, Ray was there in the front row, his face beaming with pride. "You're my legacy, champ," he said, pulling Desmond into a bear hug. To Desmond, those words were a sacred bond, a truth he never questioned, until a single moment changed everything. It was a slow afternoon at the Jacksonville precinct, the kind where officers traded stories to pass the time. Desmond sat in the break room, his boots propped on a chair, a styrofoam cup of coffee in hand. The conversation turned to DNA tests, a topic buzzing across social media. Detective Marcus Tillman, a burly veteran with a quick laugh, shared how his cousin's tests revealed a link to a Revolutionary War hero. Officer Lena Harper, a rookie with bright eyes, chimed in about her own results, uncovering Irish roots no one in her family knew about. The room hummed with curiosity, officers joking about their own heritage. Desmond leaned back, a smile tugging at his lips. "My grandma always swore we had West African blood and a bit of Native American," he said, his tone light. "Maybe I should see if her stories check out." The idea lingered, a spark of curiosity about his origins. He'd grown up on Charlene's tales of ancestors who'd survived slavery and carved out lives against the odds. A DNA test felt like a way to connect to that legacy, to see his family's story written in his genes. Later that week, with a rare day off, he ordered a kit online. The process almost laughably simple: spit in a tube, seal it, send it off. As he dropped the package in the mailbox outside his apartment, a quiet excitement stirred. What would his DNA reveal? Would it confirm the family lore, maybe add a new chapter? DNA tests were everywhere, friends posting results on X, colleagues sharing stories at the precinct. What harm could come from learning more about who you are? Desmond had no idea that this small act would unearth a truth that would shatter his world. The email arrived on a chilly Saturday morning, the notification from the DNA testing company glowing on Desmond's phone. He sat at his kitchen table, a mug of black coffee steaming beside him, his heart humming with anticipation. The app loaded slowly, each second stretching as he tapped his fingers impatiently. Finally, the results appeared: 62% West African, a trace of Native American, just as Charlene's grandmother had claimed. Desmond smiled, a wave of satisfaction washing over him as the family stories held true. But as he scrolled further, his eyes caught on the section labeled paternal line. His breath hitched, his stomach dropping. The data showed no match to the Carter lineage. His paternal DNA traced to a different family, one he didn't recognize. A line that diverged from Ray's entirely. Desmond blinked, his mind scrambling to make sense of it. This had to be a glitch. He refreshed the app, the numbers staring back unchanged, cold and unyielding. The coffee grew cold in his hands as questions flooded his mind, each one sharper than the last. If Ray Carter wasn't his father, then who was? Memories of his childhood flashed, Ray teaching him to cast a fishing line, cheering at his high school football games, calling him champ after his first arrest as a rookie cop. Those moments felt sacred, but now they were tainted, like a photograph curling at the edges. Why had no one told him? Who was hiding this truth, and why? Desmond's pulse quickened, confusion giving way to a simmering anger. He wasn't just searching for answers anymore, he was searching for the truth, and it was about to tear his family apart. Desmond drove to his childhood home, the familiar streets of Jacksonville blurring past as his mind churned with questions. The house looked the same, white siding, a neatly trimmed lawn, the porch swing creaking in the breeze, but it felt like a stranger's home, a facade hiding a lie. Charlene was in the kitchen, humming an old gospel hymn as she stirred a pot of collard greens, the scent filling the air with memories of countless Sundays. Desmond stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, the weight of his discovery pressing against his chest like a stone. He couldn't pretend, couldn't let the moment pass in silence. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but sharp, cutting through the hum of her tune. Charlene turned, her smile fading as she saw the storm in his eyes. She wiped her hands on a dishcloth, her movements slow, as if sensing the conversation's gravity. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked, stepping toward him, her voice soft with concern. Desmond didn't sit, his hands clenched at his sides, his police training keeping him composed but not calm. "Why does my DNA say I'm not Dad's son?" The words hung heavy, like a thunderclap in the quiet kitchen. Charlene froze, the dishcloth slipping from her fingers to the floor, her face paling as if the life had drained from her. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible. Desmond stepped closer, his voice rising, edged with pain. "I took a DNA test, Mom. It doesn't match Dad's family. Who's my real father? Why didn't you tell me?" Her hands shook as she gripped the counter for support, her eyes welling with tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a choked sob. Desmond's anger flared, his voice cutting through the silence. "I deserve the truth, Mom." "Who is he?" Charlene sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping under the weight of decades of guilt. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Desmond's heart pounded, his fists tightening. "Tell me what?" Charlene took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet his gaze. "It was Aaron, your Uncle Aaron. We were together. Before I married your father." The name hit Desmond like a physical blow, his breath catching in his throat, his vision blurring. Aaron Carter, his father's younger brother, the quiet man who'd always been a shadow at family gatherings. Lingering on the edges with a reserved smile, never saying much. Desmond's mind raced, memories flashing, Aaron's awkward silences at Thanksgiving, the way he'd avoid Charlene's gaze, the subtle distance he kept from Ray, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. Charlene's voice trembled as she continued, tears streaming down her face, her hands twisting the dishcloth. "We were in love, Desmond, back in college. Aaron was my first love, my everything. But life tore us apart, and by the time we found each other again, I was already married to Ray." Desmond's chest tightened, his own tears rising as he tried to process the betrayal. "Why didn't you tell Dad? Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice cracking, the pain raw and unfiltered. Charlene wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her voice barely holding together. "I couldn't. I didn't want to destroy everything. Your father, Ray, loved you so much from the moment you were born. I didn't want you to grow up in a broken home." Desmond's breath was ragged, the weight of her words suffocating, like a noose tightening around his heart. His entire life, every memory with Ray, every moment of pride and love, felt like a house of cards collapsing. "You should have told me," he said, his voice low, laced with pain and betrayal. Charlene reached for his hand, her fingers trembling, but he pulled away, stepping back as if the distance could shield him from the truth. "Why did you lie?" he asked, his voice breaking, tears spilling down his cheeks. Her sobs filled the kitchen, her voice a whisper. "Because I was afraid of losing you." Desmond shook his head, the betrayal cutting deeper than he could bear. The truth had been spoken, but it wasn't the kind that set anyone free. It was the kind that shattered everything. Charlene's story began long before Desmond was born. In the vibrant, chaotic world of her college years at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. She was 19, a bright-eyed education major with dreams of teaching children to love books as much as she did. Her laughter echoed across the campus, her energy drawing people in like a magnet. That's where she met Aaron Carter, a 20-year-old engineering student with a quiet intensity and a smile that made her heart skip a beat. Aaron wasn't just handsome. He was thoughtful, ambitious, the kind of man who could calm her exam-weak nerves with a single look or make her laugh until her sides ached. They became inseparable, spending late nights in the library, sharing dreams under the oak trees lining the quad, their hands intertwined as they walked across campus. They'd talk about their future, a small house with a wraparound porch, kids chasing fireflies in the yard, a life simple but overflowing with love. To Charlene, Aaron wasn't just a boyfriend, he was her soulmate, the one she saw herself growing old with, their lives woven together like the roots of the ancient trees they sat beneath. They made promises, whispered in the glow of streetlights, to build a life together, no matter what the world threw at them. But fate is rarely kind to young love, and it had other plans for Charlene and Aaron. One rainy evening in their junior year, Aaron was supposed to meet Charlene at their favorite diner, a cozy spot off campus where they'd share milkshakes and dream aloud. She waited under a flickering street lamp, the rain soaking through her jacket, her heart sinking as the minutes ticked by. Aaron never showed. The next morning, she learned the devastating truth: he'd been in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver on a slick highway. He was in critical condition, his survival uncertain. Charlene spent weeks at his bedside in the hospital, holding his hand, whispering their promises as machines beeped in the background. When he finally woke, his recovery was grueling, and his family, protective and private, moved him to a rehab facility in Georgia, cutting off contact. Charlene was left with nothing but grief and unanswered questions, her dreams of their future slipping away like rain down a windowpane. She wrote letters, called hospitals, tracked down mutual friends, but no one had answers. Months turned into years, and the pain became a quiet ache she carried in her chest. She threw herself into her studies, graduating with a degree in education, taking a job as a librarian in Jacksonville, trying to rebuild her life. But Aaron's memory lingered, the sound of his laugh, the way his hand fit perfectly in hers, the promises they'd made. First loves are hard to forget, and Charlene never fully let him go. Years later, she met Ray Carter, a 28-year-old mechanic with a steady hand and a heart full of kindness. Ray was everything: stable, generous, dependable, the kind of man who'd fix a stranger's car in the rain without asking for payment. Their courtship was gentle, filled with quiet dinners at local diners and drives along the St. Johns River, the moonlight reflecting off the water. Ray adored Charlene, treating her like she was the only woman in the world. When he proposed, kneeling in her parents' backyard under a string of fairy lights, Charlene said yes, not because she loved him the way she'd loved Aaron, but because he offered a future she could trust, a life where she could breathe again. Their wedding was a joyful affair, the church filled with roses and gospel music, Charlene in a flowing white dress, Ray beaming as he vowed to love her forever. For the first time in years, she felt the wounds of her past begin to heal. The ache of Aaron's absence softening under Ray's steady love. But then came the moment that changed everything. After the ceremony, as guests danced and toasted with champagne, Ray pulled her aside with a grin. "I've got someone special for you to meet," he said, his voice warm with pride. Charlene's heart stopped as a familiar figure stepped forward. It was Aaron, older but unmistakable, his eyes carrying the same quiet intensity she'd loved all those years ago. Ray clapped his brother on the shoulder, oblivious to the storm brewing in Charlene's chest. "Aaron's been through hell," Ray said. "That accident in college nearly killed him, took years to recover in rehab. But he's back now, part of the family." Aaron's gaze met Charlene's, a flicker of shock and pain mirroring her own. He hadn't abandoned her, he'd been fighting to survive, cut off from the world by his injuries and his family's protectiveness. But the timing was cruel. Charlene had just vowed her life to Ray, closing the door on the future she'd once dreamed of with Aaron. The weight of that moment lingered, a silent ache she buried beneath the routines of married life, cooking for Ray, volunteering at church, building a home. But every time she saw Aaron at family gatherings, Thanksgivings with overflowing tables, summer barbecues with kids running through sprinklers, the past resurfaced, a wound that refused to heal. Would you have waited for your first love, knowing they might never return? Or would you have moved on, choosing stability over a ghost? Charlene never answered that question for herself. Fate had answered it for her. Charlene tried to bury her feelings for Aaron, telling herself their love was a closed chapter, a memory from a life that no longer existed. She was Mrs. Ray Carter now, building a home with a man who adored her, who brought her coffee in bed and fixed the creaky porch swing without being asked. But some connections don't fade with time, no matter how hard you try to outrun them. At family gatherings, birthdays, Christmas dinners, Ray's parents' anniversary parties, Aaron was there, a quiet presence across the room. Their eyes would meet for fleeting moments, and in those seconds, the years melted away, leaving Charlene as the young woman who'd waited in the rain, hoping he'd show up. Aaron felt it too, his silences heavy with unspoken words, his glances lingering just a moment too long. They avoided being alone together, both knowing the danger of their history. But the pull was undeniable, like a tide drawing them back to each other. It started innocently, a conversation at a family picnic, standing by the dessert table as they reminisced about college, their laughter a bridge to the past. Those moments grew into stolen meetings, late-night talks in empty parking lots, a coffee shop on the edge of town where no one knew them. Eventually, words turned to touches, touches to embraces, and embraces to a rekindled love neither could resist. Charlene knew it was wrong, a betrayal of her vows, but Aaron was a piece of her soul she couldn't let go. Ray, often away for weeks on business trips for his auto parts supply company, trusted Charlene completely, never suspecting that his wife's loneliness was filled by his own brother. The affair deepened, careful and hidden, fueled by a love that had never truly died, a flame that burned brighter in the shadows. When Charlene learned she was pregnant, the world shifted beneath her feet. Ray was overjoyed, his eyes lighting up as he talked about fatherhood, planning a nursery with blue walls and a rocking chair. Charlene played along, smiling through her fear, convincing herself the child could be Ray's. But Aaron knew. From the moment she told him, standing in a quiet park as the sun set, his eyes held a quiet certainty. That's my child. He never said it aloud, but the weight of it hung between them, a secret too heavy to speak. The affair continued, even after Desmond was born, Charlene finding solace in Aaron's presence during Ray's long absences. She'd call him over, using her pregnancy and later her new motherhood as excuses to be near him. "I need you," she'd whisper, her voice trembling with vulnerability, her hand brushing his as they sat on her couch, Desmond asleep in his crib. They were careful, meeting in secret, hotel rooms, Aaron's car parked in a secluded lot, always ensuring Ray suspected nothing. Desmond grew up as Ray's son, loved fiercely by the man who raised him, who taught him to tie his shoes and cheered at his little league games. Aaron watched from the sidelines, a silent father bound by guilt and secrecy, his love for Desmond a quiet ache he could never express. Years later, Aaron met Elise Thompson, a 30-year-old schoolteacher with a warm smile and a heart full of kindness. They married in a small ceremony, Elise unaware of the secret her husband carried. Aaron told Charlene it was time to end their affair, to focus on his new life. "It's over," he said, his voice firm but his eyes avoiding hers. Charlene's heart broke anew, the pain of losing him again cutting deeper than ever. "How can you walk away after everything?" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face, but Aaron was resolute, choosing his wife over the past. Charlene was left alone, carrying the weight of their secret and the child it had created, her heart torn between the life she'd built and the love she'd lost. Desmond sat in his apartment, staring at the family photos on his wall, Ray's arm around him at his Academy graduation, Charlene laughing at a barbecue, Aaron in the background, always slightly apart, his smile tight. Each image felt like a lie now, a story he believed his entire life crumbling under the weight of Charlene's confession. He could still hear Ray's voice, "No matter what, you're my son." Those words, once a comfort, now felt like a betrayal, a cruel trick played by the people he trusted most. Desmond pressed his hands to his face, trying to hold back the flood of emotions, anger, confusion, grief. "Who am I if I'm not his son?" he whispered to the empty room, the question echoing in the silence. The memories were still there, fishing trips with Ray on the St. John's River, late-night talks about life, the pride in his father's eyes when he pinned on his badge. But they were tainted, tangled in a web of deception. Charlene's words replayed in his mind, each one a knife. Aaron, her first love, the man who'd fathered him in secret. Desmond's identity, once so certain, felt like sand slipping through his fingers, leaving him grasping at fragments of a life he no longer understood. He returned to his childhood home days later, unable to stay away, needing more answers to fill the void in his chest. Charlene was in the living room, a photo album open on her lap, her eyes red from crying. Pictures of Desmond as a boy, smiling with Ray at a carnival, blowing out birthday candles, lay scattered across the couch. "Desmond," she said, her voice soft, pleading, as she stood to face him. "I never wanted to hurt you." He stood rigid, his jaw tight, his police training failing to contain the storm inside. "You didn't want to hurt me? You kept my entire life a secret. Do you know what that's done to me?" Charlene clutched the album, her voice breaking as tears fell. "I loved both you and Ray. He raised you as his own, loved you from the moment you were born. And Aaron. He loved you too, in his own way, but he stayed silent to protect us all. I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't want to destroy our family." Desmond's breath was ragged, his anger warring with grief. "Family? You call this a family? It's built on lies." Charlene reached for him, her fingers trembling, desperate to bridge the chasm between them. "Please, you have to understand. I was young, I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." Desmond's gaze softened for a moment, seeing the pain in her eyes, the weight of her guilt, but the ache in his chest was too heavy. "I needed the truth, Mom. You took that from me," he said, his voice low, tears spilling down his cheeks. He turned away, her sobs echoing behind him, the distance between them growing with every step. The house, once a haven, felt like a mausoleum, filled with the ghosts of a family that no longer existed. The tension in the Carter family reached a breaking point when Charlene, desperate to mend the fractures, insisted on a family dinner. She spent the afternoon preparing, her hands trembling as she set the table with her best china, the kind reserved for Christmas and Easter. The air was thick with the scent of her slow-cooked brisket, collard greens, and cornbread, but the warmth of the meal couldn't mask the storm brewing. Aaron and his wife, Elise, arrived first, Aaron's eyes cautious as he greeted Charlene, sensing the weight of the occasion. Elise, unaware of the family's secret, chatted warmly about her students, her voice a bright contrast to the tension. Ray entered next, his usual warmth filling the room, his laugh booming as he complimented Charlene's cooking. Desmond trailed behind, his face a mask of barely contained rage, his hands clenched at his sides, his police badge clipped to his belt a reminder of the control he was struggling to maintain. They sat around the table, the clink of silverware and forced small talk, Aaron's latest project at his engineering firm, Ray's recent business trip to Atlanta, Desmond's cases at the precinct, doing little to ease the suffocating tension. Charlene ceded. To us? The argument erupted, voices overlapping in a cacophony of hurt. Charlene's pleas for forgiveness, Aaron's stammered apologies, Ray's accusations of betrayal. Elisa's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she realized the depth of the secret, her husband's past laid bare. Desmond, caught in the storm, felt his world collapsing, his identity as Ray's son, the foundation of his life, reduced to ashes. His years as a police officer, trained to stay calm under pressure, gave way to raw emotion. "You both lied to me my whole life," he shouted, his voice breaking, his eyes burning into Aaron. "You let me believe a lie." In a moment of blind rage, he reached for his service weapon. A reflex born of years on the force, the weight of the gun familiar in his hand. "You destroyed everything," he roared, the pistol trembling as he aimed it at Aaron. The room fell silent, all eyes on Desmond, panic seizing the air. Charlene screamed, "Desmond, no!" lunging toward him. Ray shouted, "Put it down, son!" But it was too late. A single shot rang out, the sound deafening in the small dining room, the smell of gunpowder mingling with the scent of brisket. Aaron slumped forward, blood pooling on the table, staining the white tablecloth. Elisa's screams pierced the air as she cradled her husband, sobbing, her hands shaking. Ray lunged at Desmond, wresting the gun from his hands, his face a mask of grief and disbelief. Charlene collapsed to the floor, her cries echoing through the house. Desmond stood frozen, the reality of his actions crashing over him like a tidal wave, his badge now a symbol of his fall. The aftermath was a blur of chaos and heartbreak. Sirens wailed as police swarmed the Carter home, transforming the place of Sunday dinners and family laughter into a crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across the porch, neighbors gathering on the sidewalk, whispering in shock. Desmond was arrested, his badge stripped, his wrists bound in the same cuffs he'd used on countless suspects. The Jacksonville community reeled, unable to reconcile the officer they'd admired with the man who'd pulled the trigger. The trial was a media frenzy, dominating local news and trending on X, with headlines like "Hero Cop's Deadly Betrayal" splashed across the Jacksonville Times. Prosecutors painted Desmond as a man consumed by betrayal, his training making his actions all the more reckless. He wasn't a victim, the lead prosecutor argued, her voice steady in the packed courtroom. He was a trained officer who chose vengeance over justice. The defense countered that Desmond was a man broken by a devastating truth, his identity shattered by a secret kept for decades. He snapped under a burden no one could bear, his lawyer pleaded, pointing to his spotless record and community service. Witnesses recounted the dinner's chaos, Charlene's tearful testimony about her affair, her voice breaking as she described her love for both men, Ray's stoic recounting of the night, his eyes hollow with loss, Elisa's grief-stricken account of watching Aaron die, her life upended by a secret she'd never known. The jury deliberated for 3 days, torn between Desmond's service and the irreversible act he'd committed. In the end, he was convicted of manslaughter, sentenced to 15 years in prison, a punishment that felt hollow to a family already shattered. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, addressed Desmond directly. "Your pain does not justify your actions. You took a life, destroyed a family, and betrayed the trust of your community." The ripple effects of that night tore through Jacksonville like a storm. Ray and Charlene's marriage, already strained by the revelation, crumbled entirely. Ray moved out, unable to look at Charlene without seeing Aaron's blood on the table. He retreated to a small apartment, his once warm demeanor replaced by a quiet bitterness, his auto shop sold to a chain. Charlene left Jacksonville, unable to face the neighbors' whispers or the memories haunting her home. She relocated to a small town in Georgia, living alone, her days spent in a haze of regret, the photo album of Desmond's childhood her only companion. Elise, devastated by Aaron's death, left the city, unable to bear the sight of the places they'd shared, parks, coffee shops, their favorite bookstore. She started over in Orlando, teaching at a new school, but the grief followed her, a shadow she couldn't escape. The Carter home, once a hub of laughter and love, stood empty, its windows dark, the porch swing still. Neighbors organized a vigil, lighting candles for Aaron, their prayers mingling with tears for a family they'd once envied. "Desmond was our hero," said Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor who'd known him since he was a boy, her voice trembling. How did it come to this? Community groups held forums, grappling with questions of trust and truth, wondering how a family so admired could hide such a secret. The precinct, too, felt the loss, officers like Marcus and Lena struggling to process Desmond's fall, their break room now quieter, the memory of that DNA test conversation a bitter irony. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a forensic psychologist called to testify, offered insight into Desmond's unraveling. He built his identity around being Ray Carter's son, she told the court, her voice calm but firm. The DNA test didn't just reveal a biological truth, it dismantled his sense of self. For someone with Desmond's sense of duty, trained to uphold justice, the betrayal by his mother and Aaron was a psychological earthquake. His reaction, while tragic, was a response to that loss. But she emphasized that his training should have restrained him, making his choice to act in rage all the more devastating. The community, too, sought answers, turning to therapists and pastors to process the collective grief. "It's a reminder that secrets don't stay buried," said Pastor Green at a local church, addressing a packed congregation. "They fester, and when they surface, they can destroy everything." Desmond's story is a haunting reminder that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of clawing their way to the surface. A simple DNA test, taken out of curiosity, unraveled a family built on lies, leading to betrayal, rage, and a tragedy that could never be undone. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. What would you do if the truth about your family came knocking, threatening to upend everything you've ever known? Would you face it, knowing it could shatter your world, or bury it, hoping it would stay hidden? Can love survive a betrayal this deep, or does it fracture under the weight of lies? And perhaps the most chilling question, how well do we truly know the people we call family, the ones we trust with our hearts, our lives, our identities? This story lingers, a testament to the power of truth and the devastation it can bring when it's been hidden too long. We want to hear from you. What do you think about Desmond's choice? Could he have walked away from the truth? Or was tragedy inevitable? What would you do if a secret this big upended your life? And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. Are you in Miami, London, or maybe a small town halfway across the world? Drop all your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and we love seeing this true crime community come alive. If this story broke your heart, smash that like button, share it with your friends, maybe spark a debate at your next family dinner, and subscribe for more true crime deep dives that uncover the darkest corners of human nature. Hit that bell so you never miss a video, because trust me, you don't want to sleep on the next one. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and maybe think twice before digging into your family's past. Thank you for watching, you incredible crime junkies.